And we're live.
This is Plant Daddy Podcast, serving you intersectional horticulture. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Steven.
Today we have a very special guest. Say hi, Miles.
Hi, Miles.
This is Miles. I actually thought that he would do that when I said it, so that was really gratifying. Yeah, sorry. Okay. So after our last episode where I basically talked for 80 minutes about orchids and barely scratched the surface, today we're talking about our favorite types of plants. And so Miles here is the owner of the plant store in White Center, Seattle. And as our first guest, we're going to subject you to some friendly interrogation. Tell us about yourself, your degrees, your plant store, and your background in horticulture.
Oh, okay. Well, my name is Miles, and I currently, who knows when this will go to air.
Wow. This is our fourth recording session, and we have yet to put one up yet.
We're building up a backlog.
Yeah, we just want you to be able to binge a few episodes as we get
I also
going.
can't figure out how to put the music in quite, but I'm really close.
But we are getting there.
Yes, well, so I currently own a plant store in White Center neighborhood, technically still Seattle. But yeah, I just love plants, which is why I opened this store. Also was maybe fired from Amazon, but that's another story.
I don't know if we can say their name. We might have to bleep that.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
Oh, we can.
Okay.
Amazon's also the name of a river.
That's what
You're
That's
right.
all I have to say.
The
I worked
jungle
in the jungle.
The
river
Amazon
place.
basin fired you.
Yeah, they did.
Wow.
Actually.
All of the animals and
people.
indigenous people came
They
together.
keep mosquitoes, but
Yeah.
not.
So
Malaria is fine, Miles is
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, I'm just too much of a free thinker, I think, actually.
Yeah.
For
So
the rigid Amazon.
yeah.
Tell us about your education plans.
So I hail from Ohio State. I went to the Ohio State University and got a bachelor's degree in horticulture. Studied mostly production and then also a little bit about design, so I can grow a plant and design your backyard and put a plant in your backyard.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I stayed on and got a degree actually in a master's degree in horticulture, plant physiology, and my major focus for that and my thesis paper was actually about greenhouse management, but more specifically how to educate undergraduate level students as well as entry-level industry professionals in greenhouse management and how to grow plants, basically.
So I'm already hearing new things. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wait, about me?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
yeah, we're learning about you too.
Oh.
So, to help our guests learn about you more, we spent some
Yeah.
time in our pilot episode talking about gardening and plant hobbies sort of having a stigma or reputation as being a gay interest, but obviously that's not an entirely true or accurate representation.
Because we were talking about. I've met some people who felt like growing up, they were interested in plants. They felt like people said that was gay or girly, kind of, or if you like certain plants, if you like African violets, what a gay thing to like.
Oh,
Do you have
there's
any-
something much more bro about succulents
And
than African violets.
Yeah, and I was just saying, I started doing this so much later in life that I kind of didn't realize it. Maybe I don't care at this point. I kind of see it, but.
I guess, yeah. I might have a different experience. I've just always liked plants since I was a really little kid. Second grade is kind of how I say where my love for plants came from, because we did seed starting experiments with sunflowers and corn and stuff, and I think that's kind of what really triggered me.
That sounds so high.
I know, right? Yeah,
Very,
some soybeans and corn.
Yep.
Yeah, but that's what we did, and I think that was my first piqued my interest in plants. And then I was into plants ever since then. It was kind of going through the cabinets and growing beans, like lima beans and kidney beans and stuff. Yeah, like they went to flour, honestly.
Giant
like,
pantry staples.
Yeah,
His
and
favorite plant is still corn. Okay, let's be clear.
well, I didn't do and they would go to flour, and I would actually get like seed pods off of them, you know, like with the peas and stuff.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
actually.
and I would grow like the tops of carrots and then like little pieces of potatoes and stuff in my bedroom because I'm a weirdo.
In your bedroom?
Yeah,
That's cute.
That kind of just, I feel like I'm smelling like some rotting pieces, but it sounds interesting.
It's a humid
like you
smell.
have a full sun bedroom. or
yeah.
something,
Well, I
right?
did. Yeah, because I actually was lucky that my bedroom at my parents' house, which they still have the same house, was the southwest corner of the building.
That's ideal for full sun.
Yeah, it's the best room for full sun. And there was a window on each wall, just normal size, I guess like suburban house windows, you know.
So this was like meant to be.
Yeah,
All the
and
pieces were there.
I had like the hottest room too, so it was like I have a brother and a sister, but I was the only one that had a ceiling fan because my room was so hot. Because the best sun equals probably the most heat.
Some kids
So-
are excited about TVs in their bedroom, but Miles had a ceiling
Oh, I can
fan.
grow beans.
Yeah.
Well, I had to. Yeah, I mean, my parents, whenever we would have guests, would be like, "Oh, go up and see Miles' room. It's a jungle," you know. So, and my house plants really started too outside of like just stuff from the cupboard. When our neighbor gave me a piece of her spider plant,
Oh,
because
cool.
the spider plant, which
That one's really easy to
yeah,
propagate.
Yeah, it's very easy to propagate. She started them in like red Dixie cups and would give them away when she would have card nights
Cool.
with all of the neighbors. So yeah. But as far as my experience goes with like homosexuality and plants or house plants in general, when I went to school and I was getting my degree in horticulture, I went to Ohio State, so it was a pretty big department, and there was one other gay male. I don't know about the women, whether they were gay or not. I don't know if that's even matters. But actually, I have a lot of lesbians that come into my store, now that I think about it. Although it could just be White Center.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say.
honestly, yeah. The edgy gays live down there.
Yeah.
Which means lesbians first.
Yeah.
They always come first.
Well, they have to build everything for us.
They have to build everything. No, that's
True.
so true.
We respect the hell out of that.
Yeah.
No, I have this one customer. She's so great. She like builds these planters and stuff, and she's been in
Really?
a few times recently. Yeah, she like makes these wooden planter things, and she's been in recently to buy some stuff to like make for her girlfriend or wife or
Cool.
SO or whatever.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of ask more about that. Like, what do you think makes your store unique?
I'm from Ohio. If we haven't already, I said that already.
This is new
I'm from
information.
Ohio. Yeah,
I feel like I've been in your bedroom.
Yeah, you've been in my bedroom.
Sort of.
Very few have been in my bedroom actually in that home. But
I do count as one of them.
what?
You showed me your bedroom when I was
Oh.
over.
Not at my
Okay.
parents'
Oh,
house?
no, not that. Never mind. Sorry.
This plug for
I'm like, you
your,
just moved.
In Ohio.
This plug for your plant store. It's
Oh, right.
Nearly
Oh.
ruined, nearly derailed.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Oh, well, I was just going to say, so I'm from Ohio, and I...
Where are you from?
Ohio, actually,
Okay.
Oh.
yeah. And
Why didn't you
I
tell us?
try to, prices and stuff, and like the cost of living there is, I think when I moved here, it was like 30% less than Seattle at the time. It may be less than that now because Columbus, where I'm from in Ohio, is kind of coming up and there's a lot of stuff going on. But stuff there I felt was always very nicely priced. And so my experience with buying plants was more so going to community like garden centers. So like mom and pop sort of garden centers that would also buy in plants from Florida or California or where have you. And the prices of those plants to me always seemed reasonable. And then later when I was in college, I worked for a plant boutique and the prices were much higher, which thinking back, they were lower than Seattle prices are now. And so my experience when I first moved to Seattle, I made a friend through a plant group on Facebook. And one of the very first things that we did when I got here was I wanted him, he's a plant friend, obviously, wanted him to take me around to all of the garden centers and the plant stores that he liked in the Seattle area. And so it was like culture shock because of all of like, I guess the availability, but also the prices. So, when I've wanted to own a plant store or sell plants for a really long time. So one of the tenets for me for opening a plant store was like basically fair pricing for stuff.
Yeah, I think that's very clear too. I've bought a few there that I feel like are a price where I'm like, okay, I can just try this. No, I'm just trying to. No, I'm just trying to talk about it actually. Because I do think this actually helps, right? If you're shopping for plants in Seattle,
you do not need to pay that much
it is
for
important
a
to know
4
the
or
place.
6 inch tropical.
Or just know the few good places to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some stuff
Miles,
just
you did not
is...
put us up to this or something. So let's make that super clear.
Right.
No, I think this is good for people.
Some stuff just is more expensive, but I mean, for anyone that's listening, I suppose, it's really important, I think, to shop around, because some places, like, maybe because they pay high rent, like in Seattle, Capitol Hill, very trendy area, people are paying much higher rents, and so they're maybe forced to have higher prices so that they have higher margins like on their plants. So that kind of makes sense. But if you have a car, which many people don't have a car in Seattle, go to a garden center, a larger garden center, or some sort of outlying place. I mean, I'm technically still in Seattle, but down in White Center, our rents are not so high, so my plant prices are not so high. But so that was one of the reasons, for starting the store and like sort of filling it with the selection that I have. Plus, I'm also a plant lover, so I just try to fill it up with plants that I appreciate and like. Although I do like most plants, so that maybe Matthew does not.
Yeah, we'll frequently be like, "What do you think of this?" and not the same agreement.
Yeah. So, and then I try to make it interesting because I have some more pointed, I suppose, or narrowed in hobbies that have to do with plants too. Like I do some of the wabi-kusa and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Which currently I'm not selling like those plants that you might use in one, but I am doing a class where we put them together. So most people come in and I have an example sitting on the desk where the register is, and people come in and they're just like, oh, what's this, and it's really cool because for me it's great that people are interested and curious about plants, because I'm really interested in education and teaching people and sharing my passion about plants with people. But it's also great to see that kind of representation of a piece like that, I think, at a local store. Because even just a few years ago, like, it's not something that many people had heard of, with the wabi-kusa, which is like an aquascaping style of, there's many different types of forms of wabi-kusa. I do the terrestrial form, where it's more land than water for the wabi-kusa.
Okay.
But you don't see it very often. And when I first got interested in the hobby of this Japanese style of putting plants with water and making essentially like a little bog garden, there was like nowhere to go locally to learn about it. I mean, I watched a lot of videos because it's really big in Germany and in Asian countries right now. And I watched a lot of videos, and I just kind of like looked at plant selections online, and I was just like, oh, like where could I ever get these plants? And so, eventually discovered Aquarium Zen, and like, so they have a lot of those plants, and I actually, I work with them a little bit, and I get plants from them for teaching this class, and, happy to support Steve over there. But yeah, so I think it's really neat, and I like being able to offer that as like as something for people that might be interested in it, just because when I was first interested in it, it wasn't something that was like, oh, you can just go down to your local plant store and, pick up these kind of specialized plants. So,
yes, that's cool. Yeah, going beyond just like, okay, here's your plant, all right, water it, goodbye, or something. And nice. So just to kind of call out Aquarium Zen, which you mentioned, they have a great Instagram you can follow, or visit the store in Seattle too. It's a great Planet Aquarium place. Yeah. So yeah, to move on.
So we like to spend a little bit of time at the beginning of our episodes talking about any cool things going on with our own plants that we're particularly excited about. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that the Hoya obovata that I've been talking about for episodes now has finally bloomed. And it has 3 panicles. I found one hidden behind the leaf, and 2 of them are about to start opening. The first one is all completely open. And to answer questions that we brought up last time, it is fragrant, but only at night, and it's kind of like a rose, but not very strong. So
Okay.
yeah, you don't smell it if you just walk into the apartment, which is a shame because I like flowers that do that.
And you've been posting pictures. I think they're really pretty.
They are
It's
all
like
over
a-
Instagram.
yeah.
I am so excited about this plant. Yeah.
So I think-
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, I have this bulbophyllum orchid that is either adding leaves or some flower spikes. We'll
They
see.
kind of look
I
like
can't-
leaves to me.
I know, they look like flowers at first. But it just flowered. That would be unfair. I was just like, whoa, I'm really good at this. When it first started happening, I'm like, I just had flowers like a month ago. And I think this is supposed to be a free flowering one. So
But to
we'll
be
see.
fair, you also don't know its growth habit yet, whether it likes to rest after it flowers
Yeah.
or grow fresh
Like,
foliage after it
really
flowers
no
and then
knowledge.
bloom.
Yeah, and as I like to do, I don't think there's a whole lot of literature about this one. So at least
fact,
the species.
I think it's not even really a bulbophyllum. I think it's a
Yeah, it was changed, but that-
Stirhopetalum.
Yeah.
Stirhopetalum. Yeah.
Which
But
is
anyway,
your
it's-
responsibility to know.
I know,
Okay,
I'm
so
letting you down.
I'm angry. At
Steven
you.
actually had a party when
tried
it
to turn
flowered,
it around.
just like the one in Crazy Rich Asians, where they're all hanging out to
yeah.
watch the orchid cactus bloom. But Steven just got a bunch of gays together to look at his orchid when it bloomed.
And it just happened to be all gays.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
plant gays.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Miles, do you have any exciting
I
plant
don't.
things?
I was just trying to think about it. Well, when I first got over here to Steven's place, I was excited. I wanted to see his what is it? The
Cissus tuberosa.
Tuberosa. That's correct. Yeah. Cissus tuberosa cutting that I gave him because his was. I was a little jealous because last time I was here for his flower coming out party. His had already pushed out a little bit of green stem because it was just like the caudex before, and so I was jealous because mine had not pushed out any green yet. But I've been watering mine a lot more. It's in terracotta, so it does dry out pretty quickly, but it doesn't like a lot of water. And now it has a pretty nice vine with very beautiful tendrils, and
Ooh.
it's on my wire grow rack, and
Is it climbing up?
it was climbing up, but it's like it's like 3 feet long already. Like
Really?
it's
Oh,
insane.
wow.
Yeah, I'll have to show you guys a photo. But like,
God, that's like
Steven's is
20
like 4
times
inches.
larger.
yeah, mine has a.
In fact, Steven's is like 3 inches.
Yeah. Mine has like 2 growing points on it too. And it is it was climbing, and the tendrils were kind of coming out and onto the wire rack, and I took them off, and it's actually coming up from a lower shelf and then kind of going over horizontally. I've trained it. And
So
kinda
maybe I'll put mine
put
in
the
a new pot,
tendrils.
which I love to do, compulsively putting things in new pots. So this actually plays right into my hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Cissus is the grape family?
It's in the grape
Okay.
family. Yeah, it has almost like a very similar leaf to a grape, actually, too. This one in particular. Some of the other cissus have much different leaves. It's actually it's pretty varied genus. It's really interesting. Some of the ones that you see the most common are actually Cissus rotundifolia, which is a succulent sort of leaf.
Okay.
And it also has tendrils. They all have tendrils, which is cool. So it will climb. You usually see it like in hanging baskets, but that one's it's more of like a silver dollar sized leaf. It will get like a pinkish blush to it in a higher light, but it's more of a succulent, which is kind of cool for the family. The tuberosa, which is what we were just discussing, has a more delicate leaf, but it has the swollen base, like it has a caudex, so it has a swollen base to it. And then the one that's probably the most common, I learned it
Is this
as
bicolor?
No, actually.
okay.
It's bicolor or bicolor is that's a really interesting one. And then a common name for that too is Rex begonia vine. Have you heard that?
Yeah,
Because
because
the leaves kind of look like Rex begonia leaves.
This sounds really
they're like
confusing.
purple and pink
is
and
still the grape
silvery.
family?
This is still the Cissus genus.
It looks
Yeah.
really delicate and very like tropical jungle.
It's really neat. Yeah. So
Is
there's
this-
that one, which you don't really see too often. I mean,
I've
most
seen
of
it
the
a
time
lot
it's
on
whole.
Instagram and Pinterest.
Yeah,
Is it
it's
a caudex forming?
it's not. It's just a simple vine, simple climbing vine. Really beautiful leaves. I feel like it's more advertised as a rare plant, but
Yeah.
I've definitely seen it available locally. But the one I was going to talk about was the I can't think of what that name is, but I learned the common name as kangaroo vine, but it's
Oh, okay.
actually Danish ivy. Like when I get plants of it in now, it's Danish ivy. But Ellen Danica is like the cultivar, like Cissus.
Oh, they are calling this Cissus antarctica.
Oh, Antarctica?
Apparently. It's from Australia.
Yeah, well, so that's like one of the most common ones. It's pretty cool, although, so my point was, though, is that the leaf on that actually is like, it's split into 3 leaflets, and it kind of looks like poison ivy. So that's kind of interesting, though. But it has like, that sort of mitten sort of shape, and has sort of like that grape leaf sort of shape, which is kind of indicative of the genus for Cissus, so it's pretty cool.
Cool. Nice. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So, before we dive into our topic, I just want to remind everybody that we can be found on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest as Plant Daddy Podcast, and also online at plantdaddypodcast.com. We also posted our first video tutorial on YouTube about repotting and mounting Phalaenopsis orchids from our last episode. So, anything else before we dive into our...
Hashtag Plant Daddy.
Hashtag Plant Daddy.
Hashtag Plant Daddy Podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably do that.
Yeah, he's just reciting what I've been putting on all my Instagram posts recently.
Nice. When I teach classes, in the middle of class, I'll just be like, hashtag the plant store.
It's Seattle Plant Store.
Oh, right. Hashtag Seattle Plant Store.
At symbol right. Seattle Plant Store.
At symbol. Yeah, I just updated my voicemail, so it has that in there now.
Ooh,
it's like, follow us on Instagram.
You definitely should. So we're going to talk about our favorite plant groups. And I'm going to hand this off to Steven right now. He has a couple of exciting things to discuss.
Yeah, hopefully. So I really largely, I would say, into carnivorous plants, and one that I wanted to share, I guess, is butterworts. So Pinguicula are really a broad kind of group of really, I think, different types of plants. So, or diverse plants, like they're temperate, tropical. There are a lot of like cliff dwelling ones. So I think there's a lot of diversity within there, like color-wise, how you cultivate these. These are also really easy to propagate. Many are very easy to grow in your home. I think the most accessible ones are typically Mexican ones. So there are some that grow really all over the interior of Mexico and kind of down into Central America. They tend to be really colorful. They have a distinct summer and winter form, which is interesting as well. So the summer form is carnivorous, kind of gooey. It'll be like a sort of a fly trap kind of, well, not like a Venus flytrap mechanism, but sort of like a sticky trap to trap gnats.
Can you tell us why they're called butterworts?
No.
Oh, it's because,
well,
I was hoping that I was giving him a softball pitch.
Yeah.
So the carnivorous leaves are covered in tiny little droplets of the sticky digestive fluid, and it gives them a very greasy, slippery appearance and feel. So they're called butterworts because they feel like butter.
Oh.
Sorry, back
now
to you.
I know.
No, and that's interesting. I would say many sort of hobbyists who enjoy these, we call them pings instead.
Yeah.
So maybe it's one of those things where even if you're looking online, you might, search Pinguicula. Butterwort would, but maybe butterwort would give you sort of a much broader kind of return rather
it's
than
that
like
big
the
difference between
focus.
Common name and scientific name. There are tons of things that share common names. So Steven's talking about Pinguiculas.
So for pings, I think it's interesting to kind of observe that carnivorous form, then to see them change into a succulent winter form that requires much less water, where they're not carnivorous. That transition back and forth is really interesting. And again, once you get the hang of just this slightly different than I would say a normal houseplant kind of care, they're very easy to care for, and also very small, so you can have a big collection. So my second group, this is I would choose something else carnivorous probably, but just to try to be a little bit different, I have been getting into caudex plants sort of more recently. And for me, I don't have any particular favorites yet, I would say. I'm just trying my first few. The cissus that we were talking about earlier. I have some adeniums as well. And I've had others here and there, I'd say with mixed success so far. But what I like is just the sort of architectural structures of them. It's also just interesting to. It feels like to me sort of a more advanced, in some senses, like succulent that I'm growing. So it's interesting to kind of feel like I'm going further on that path, I guess, as sort of a plant grower. And then also, I would say learning about winter and summer growth. I feel like for some of these, they're more finicky, so I've learned about that as well. Set up other sort of lighting situations for them.
What are some of the things that you are having to take into account, and how are you treating that in your cultivation?
So, a big one is really summer versus winter growers. So I have a separate table at my place that's set up with winter lighting, so that's much shorter. Some of my, quote unquote summer lighting is like 16 hours a day, and the winter would be closer to 8.
Okay.
So some that I'm encouraging to grow, right, because they tend to grow in winter. Also, I would say soil-wise, this is a learning experience for me. So I visited Arizona, this is about a year ago now, and I got some adeniums there. And there they grow it with this just kind of a different soil completely. And some of that makes sense just with the weather. But here I've tried to take some of that into account, like learning not just about, quick drying versus not as quick, right? Like for succulents, or like a more minerally mix versus less. But there they used coconut husk, and their theory was more about, all right, how can we retain more moisture for this really hot environment? So with this coconut husk that will soak up water, but also their theory was like, for adeniums, we just need to create a little bit of space for their roots. So having like a more absorbent kind of chunk of the coconut, but then having more, air pockets, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so rather than just thinking about, like, minerals versus not, which is what I was used to before. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm toying with that still, and then for some of my other succulents, I'm like, okay, well, should I put, like, a sort of, like, a little wet pocket in here, maybe? Or maybe if I, produce a little bit more space kind of in, between these, chunks, and kind of do something like they're doing there. And I think in some cases that's maybe helped a little bit. So
it kind of almost sounds like how you grow orchids, trying to keep the roots aerated.
Yeah, and I'd never really thought of that for succulents at all. So
yeah, I wouldn't have used anything that was as absorbent as coconut.
Yeah, it's very
husk.
surprising, but really I've had the most success, at least I've ever had, with adeniums doing that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite caudiciform species?
God, I have a lot that I'll look at, like, what's it called? I think it's called Rare Succulents, that that online store.
They're from Arizona,
I
Mexico
want
or
to
something.
say, and it's really like a kind of a specimen plant store where they'll have 15 of this, or they'll have just pictures of like 3 exotic, 100-year-old or something plants for sale for outrageous prices, but they'll have some, some $20 ones in there as well.
They also are one of those sources that they'll be selling individual plants that they photograph from multiple angles, because like a 50-year-old something exotic that grows very slowly has a very unique shape to it.
Yeah, so, and I would say, another one, I don't know if this quite counts as a caudex plant, but I have a pseudolithos plant that I really love, and it just looks like this green glob, like a half-buried melon kind of thing. And that one, you can find those on Rare Succulents, but that one has been really interesting too. I have not used any absorbent, coir or anything in that, but just to
interesting.
Be clear, but yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about Panicula. Like, you talked about the Mexican ones, but where else are they found, and are they going to be grown the same? Do people still grow those ones?
Yeah, they're kind of found everywhere, ish. I think it's one of those ones that's found kind of everywhere but Antarctica.
Okay.
So here in Washington, we have at least one species that's found just up in the mountains, and these are near some hikes that people go to often around here. And there are some, interesting species that are found near the Gulf of Mexico, like in Florida and Alabama. Mexico has tons of them. I feel like that's where most hobbyists look right now, and those are generally the easiest to care for. They don't necessarily need a super like firm dormancy period.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, there are some, there are a bunch of really growers around the world, kind of growing, especially temperate ones. I think are pretty interesting right now, but it's difficult. It's like, you have it outside for the summer, right? If your summer's appropriate, but then you have to put them in the fridge in your house for, 6 months. If they don't get that, they really won't wake up or they won't bloom.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really, I think, a really diverse genus. I mean, there's, interesting ones in Asia. I mean, maybe Australia doesn't have any, but I feel like they probably do.
They probably do.
I'm not sure at the moment.
But theirs are poisonous.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
Covered in thorns.
But yeah, really diverse. I think it's an easy one to get into as well if you can just kind of get over the it needs to be in a tray of water and let it catch bugs.
Yeah. So Miles has been looking up the rare succulents.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dying.
Yeah, he is over here fanning himself and flopping around in the couch.
They have a section on here that the tab is titled Plants Extraordinaire. And
are they extraordinary?
They're ugly, but I feel like that's...
Yeah.
Oh, but see, that's the whole aesthetic I think I like about these plants is I'm like, okay, is that a dead twig?
Steven loves the plant that looks like it is the ugly
Oh yeah,
stick.
the first time you came into my store and you picked up the most pathetic looking begonia.
Yeah, and it was like
really?
an angel wing begonia in a 2-inch pot.
What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's... So I don't know how to say
Guilty.
this genus. I'm not familiar
Oh, good.
with it.
Say it then.
It's the Cryptostemma?
Cryptostemna?
Cryptostemna? Anyway, it's $2,500.
Oh my god. $2,500?
They're routinely
for this
plants
plant
like that.
here.
I think just did a spit take for that. And it doesn't even look that big. It kind of actually, to me, just looks like a really beautiful species, Pelargonium.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of...
and I've killed Pelargonium before, so...
It's in a 7-inch pot.
Give me that $2,500 one.
Yeah.
He'll do well
Try
with that.
again.
From Angolia.
And see, look at all these are sold.
There's a lot of
they're
sold.
doing okay.
Yeah.
They're doing okay, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I actually have to admit, I didn't know that that's what Miles was doing. I just assumed he could have been looking at Grindr
I
because
thought we were looking at pings.
this neighborhood is much more diverse in gay men than Miles's home down in the south of Seattle. Yeah. So, anything else that you want to mention, Stephen?
No, I mean, I think really, caudex plants, probably the most common one that you would find around is probably an adenium, right? If you're looking sort of around the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as...
You mean that, for sale?
Yeah.
Yeah, they sell them at IKEA.
They also have
Wow.
some of the most ornate and beautiful flowers of the caudex forming plants.
Yeah, it's like if you live in zone 10B or something, right?
Yeah.
You have to be... I think you have to have a lot of sun and heat.
They can bloom in a... they can bloom in a greenhouse. In Ohio we had them and they bloomed in our greenhouse at the university.
I've even seen them blooming in south-facing, dry cleaner windows.
Yeah.
Really?
I don't think they're too difficult.
Back when I was 16 and worked at Cold Stone Creamery in Issaquah, Washington.
I worked at Cold Stone.
We've talked about this.
Oh, we have?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, so the dry cleaner that was next door to the Cold Stone Creamery had a giant adenium in their window, and it was the south-facing baking position.
Yeah.
And it was just this wiry, snaky plant with a huge caudex, very few leaves on the tip of each branch.
Yeah.
And it would have 15 scraggly-looking flowers.
So, that's interesting that you describe it like that. So, because a lot of plants that you see in a store are... Usually they're juvenile forms of a plant, so they may have a lot of leaves. They
I'm
may
actually
be
going to talk about juvenile forms.
But I was just going to say
Aroids.
too that they have a lot of leaves. They may look completely different than if you saw that plant in nature. So just if I could,
Yeah.
very briefly, one of the most popular plants that really fits into this is the poinsettia. So a poinsettia...
I was literally just thinking that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, a poinsettia, which is in the euphorbia genus, right? In
Euphorbia pulcherrima.
Yeah, well, or pulcherrima.
That's another way to say that.
Pulcherima? Who knows?
We're settling this right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I learned it as pulcherima.
Okay.
Anyway, doesn't matter.
just
It's a
started stirring the
euphorbia. And when we buy it, obviously, in the United States, it's a celebrated, like holiday plant, and has a whole story, whatever. And when we buy it, it's cuttings of a plant that have been grown. They've usually been treated with PGRs, which is plant growth regulators. And in this case, it's usually a plant growth regulator that helps it to have shorter internodes, which is the space in between leaves. And so that it's a much more dense plant with lots of leaves. So if you encounter this plant, or if you live in Florida or Southern California or Mexico or wherever south, and you grow it, it's literally sticks with leaves on the ends of it.
Yeah.
And so that's how it naturally grows. And this is a plant that we've taken from the wild and brought it into cultivation. And we've done very little to it as far as transforming it with like different chemicals or whatever. We've really just done a lot of selective breeding with it and turned it into this other plant. We treat it with chemicals when we grow it to keep it really stout. But it is just
I saw
way different.
Yeah, there was one growing in a garden in Peru. And this plant was spectacular. It was like 15 feet tall, and it kind of looked like a rhododendron. The way that it was so branched out, but every terminal point had a cluster of
a
leaves.
big plume.
Yeah, and then like some of them were scarlet red, but they just looked like if you just cut off all the tips and crammed them in a pot, that was what you would buy for Christmas.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
but this was 15 feet tall. It was really cool.
No, it's an impressive plant, and it is. I mean, as the story goes about the plant, it is actually a weed. Like it's a weed on the side of the road, like in southern Texas and Mexico and stuff. So
it kind of takes the specialness out of it.
Why? It's still a great
What
plant.
specialness? People just throw them out.
Right?
Yeah. It's essentially
Where-
the way that the market sees them is as a specialty potted crop is how it's technically classified. But when you buy it, it's literally just like buying a plant that's basically gonna die.
One of the episodes that I have in like conceptual development is like disposable plants,
Right.
and the ecology behind that. So we'll have you back when we talk about that topic more.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so if that was all we were going to talk about with the caudex plants and the panicula, I have a couple of groups that I am really excited about. Yeah, so this is what our listeners are going to start thinking of as their favorite section of our podcast, where I am basically just reciting the contents of the internet.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Concepts of the internet.
I'm going to talk about the Ficus genus. You're probably pretty familiar with figs and the ficus plants that you find for indoor decorative ornamental foliage, but it's actually a genus that contains 850 species of both woody shrubs, trees, vines, epiphytes, and even hemiepiphytes. But the Ficus genus itself is distributed throughout the tropics, with some species found in temperate zones. It's one of my favorite groups of plants because they tend to be very handsome with striking foliage, really attractive growth habits, and they're fairly easy both indoors and out, depending on what species you're growing. So, though most of them are evergreen, one of my favorite species is actually deciduous. It's Ficus carissa, the common edible fig, and this is a plant from the warmer temperate regions of Southwest Asia and the Mediterranean, from Afghanistan to Portugal. It's been cultivated for its edible fruit literally since like ancient Rome and Greece, and it's the only ficus species that really has much agricultural value. It grows as a tree or large shrub up to about 33 feet tall, and its leaves are sort of sandpaper textured with deep lobes in like counts of 3 or 5. So the common edible fig has really interesting flowers, actually. They are presented as the lining of a hollow fleshy structure called a synconium. And though the flowers are not visible, there's a small opening in the end and this is called an ostiole, which allows a specialized fig wasp to enter the flower and pollinate it, and then this facilitates the development of seeds and fruit. Each individual fruit inside the fig is a single seeded body, and in their multitude are called drupelets. The fig ripens when the skin is either green, purple, or brown, and I personally find them delicious. So I've been calling them fruit, but technically a fig is not a fruit. Instead,
It's not?
No, it is, by botanical terms, an infructescence or scion of the tree, which is also known as a false fruit or multiple fruit, and you'll also see it called a lot of times an inverted flower. And this basically means that the flower and seeds are born inside of a hollow-ended stem that contains the flowers. So a common horror-inducing thing that people love to share about figs is that each one contains a wasp, because the wasp has to crawl in to pollinate the fig, and then they can't get back out.
What?
Yeah, so don't worry, it's not nearly that horrible.
The wasp is like really tiny too.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, like it's not like the yellow jackets that we're used to and that we call wasps. The wasp family is actually huge, and like most of them are tremendously small.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to tally how many wasps I've eaten in my life right now.
Well, stay
Probably a
tuned,
lot.
and I will tell you.
A lot.
So, this is sort of true because each individual fruit does have to be, and I say fruit after having told you that that's not what they are.
No, it's just a bag of wasps. Okay?
Yeah, it's a bag of wasps. So, I've eaten my fair share of figs, and I can tell you that I've never found a dead wasp inside of one. So, what's up with that?
you-
I
Never-
look. You know,
you've
I
never
honestly,
looked.
I
Yes,
look ever
you've
since
never
I.
looked.
Yeah, I mean, I've known for a really long time.
Yeah.
But they're also really tiny. I mean, they're literally like the size of a mature seed in a fig.
Right.
So.
But, so here is something really fascinating that was talked about on popsci.com, I think. So, the female wasp enters a fig, and if the flower is a male, she'll lay her eggs. The larvae then hatch, eat, burrow out, and they carry the pollen that they were coated in ready to pollinate the next fig. However, if she crawls into a female flower, there's not enough space, so she can't lay eggs, and instead just pollinates the flower and then dies alone. The literal act of crawling into the osticle is so hard on the female wasp that she loses her antenna and wings in the process and can't leave. But the fig then produces an enzyme that completely digests the wasp.
What?
I don't know much more than that, but this basically is why you don't find inside of a fig a dead wasp. And the myth that the crunchiness of a fig is the wasp, that's totally untrue. Those are all the big, tiny little seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's actually not nearly as traumatic as it sounds. Plus, there are also multiple varieties of figs. Some of them are self-pollinating. Some of them do require the wasp. And some of them can do it either way, but do better with a wasp.
Yeah.
So these are trees that thrive in warm Mediterranean climates. And today we've had success of having like many self-pollinating cultivars that I just talked about, which make up nearly all the figs that are available for sale, like fig trees that you can grow in the United States. And this means that you don't need to live somewhere with these specialized fig wasps. In fact, California has an ideal climate for these trees, but when they were first introduced there towards the end of the 19th century, there weren't any single individual fruits even produced because they didn't have the wasps to pollinate. And it wasn't until they imported mature wild fig trees from their native region that happened to be carrying these pollinating wasps, whether as larvae or eggs. They were introduced in 1899, which then allowed for fruit production to begin taking off. So there are many regions of the U.S. that are really successful in cultivating figs, even though they tend to do best with long, hot summers. Figs will often produce 2 crops each year, one of them in the spring on old wood, and this is called a breba crop. And then the main one comes on the new wood that grows in spring, and this one is often of higher quality, but some varieties are prized for the quality of the early breba harvest as well. So for growers in the north with short summers like Seattle, varieties that produce a strong quality breba crop in the spring are ideal because we often fail to have the fall crop ripen. I happen to grow several varieties in pots on my balcony, and these usually produce about a handful of figs each year. But they would do better in the ground, and especially with all-day sun. It's pretty common, though, to find old, really established trees in gardens around Seattle because their stately form is beautiful even when the tree isn't very productive. You'll also often see trees covered in rotting fruit that never ripens, which is always kind of sad. So that's just one that you're actually probably pretty unlikely to encounter. I mention it because you'll see on Instagram and Pinterest this as a houseplant.
An edible fig?
Yeah.
As a houseplant?
Yeah, because they're really beautiful, but they don't do well indoors. They want much brighter light. They grow much larger. They're deciduous. Like, you don't want a deciduous plant indoors. So let's talk about the ones that are better for growing inside. So something that's given ficus a reputation for being difficult is their habit for dropping leaves when you change the environment, and that can even include bringing it home, putting it in a darker than desired position, or even one with a draft. Particularly with Ficus benjamina, it's pretty annoying to watch a really beautiful plant with dark, glossy leaves shed many or even most of them, and revealing like this really scraggly, twiggy appearance. So that is a particular susceptible species, but if you go with something like the India rubber plant or the banana leaf fig, these are far less likely to drop their leaves when you change their environment, and they may tolerate dryness better. You'll even find that the fiddle leaf fig is pretty tricky. There's a lot of kind of back and forth on, oh, they're so easy, or you will kill this plant. I've killed a couple, but I've also had a lot of success with even more. And basically, I think that the requirements that they're all going to agree on is that they want to have pretty high levels of moisture, but they hate their roots sitting in water. So you want to water them regularly, but with a really well-draining mix. They're definitely going to do their best if the light levels are high. Most of them don't want strong, full, direct, all-day sunlight.
This sounds difficult.
Well, that's because Steven grows plants that he
Listen,
just puts
I
on
feel
timers.
like I've grown, no, I feel like I have like 1 or 2 plants like this in my house, but that's like all you can have.
Yeah.
I feel like where it's like, oh,
But
well draining,
some
but wet,
people-
bright, but not direct.
Some
Like,
people
yeah.
might really love this because it means that you get to fuss over them a little bit. So
Yeah, and Miles, like, what is the state of the fiddle leaf fig right now? Like, in the market?
Yeah,
in
I mean,
the
they're
zeitgeist
really...
or something.
they were hugely popular a couple of years
I think they're
ago.
still hugely
Yeah.
popular, and now I feel
They're-
like, oh, you go to, a high-end furniture store and you can get it for like $1,500. Like, even they have it.
Yeah, they're still really popular. I want to say they're not as popular as they have been in the last few years. They're still pretty popular though. I don't keep them in stock very often because they sell out pretty quickly.
What do you tell people to do?
Yeah, the advice that I give people, and it sort of applies to all figs, but I've noticed this with fiddle leaf figs, is that the biggest thing with them is that they have huge leaves, right? And so the leaves do fall off, but they tend to stick around a little bit longer than like Ficus benjamina, the weeping fig. And what they do though is that they get ugly, like they get like big brown spots on them that kind of looks like a fungal infection, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people when they buy them is that, they are easy, like they're not difficult to take care of. What they crave though, like most figs, is just a stable environment. Okay. So like what Matthew was saying, they like to be moist but not wet. They like bright light, but they don't like direct light. And so that's kind of it. It's like, I think the biggest problem that people actually run into with the fiddle leaf fig is that it's more of a woody sort of houseplant because it does grow more of like a trunk and has secondary growth and stuff. But and because of that, it won't show you signs of like wilt. Like it won't show you like, oh, I want a drink of water. Like a begonia is going to be what I call an expressive plant where it'll kind of wilt down and then you water and then it pops back up. Most of these ficus that have woody growth to them don't do that. They just drop their leaves when they're stressed, or they get the big brown spots on them.
The closest to like communication that I get from my figs is that their leaves on the edible fig, they're the only ones that droop. All of the rest of them kind of lose their shine.
Right.
Like, they're really glossy if they're well watered. They get yellow if you overwater. And then if you underwater, they start to become a little bit dull as there's less turgidity in their cells.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just tell people, keep it moist but not wet. Give it bright but indirect light, so no direct sunlight. Keep it away from a cold draft, and also keep it away from a heater. So, but the thing is that you can sum all of it up.
Love this easy plan.
No, it's not hard. You can really just sum all of it up, though, to saying, give it stable growing conditions.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because, like, if you have a draft, I mean, that's basically making something not stable, right? I mean, cold draft is one thing. A hot draft is another thing, you know? So
Yeah, I'll instantly undermine everything I'm saying. So I'm remembering that I'm actually babysitting a fig right now.
This is one of the edible figs, and it's
Yeah.
just sitting out on the balcony.
And
getting
actually,
regular
there's nothing
water.
to
and
do
what
to
you're
it.
saying, what you're saying, but it kind of matches that though generally, because I was like, I was told, okay, I'll move it out there. It's gonna love it, you said, but you know, it might drop leaves at first, so maybe that's the transition, right? I just haven't really moved it at all. I kept like really in any of the weather we've had, I've kept the same watering schedule, and I think it's doing really well.
Yeah. Something that I found is that if I let my edible figs on the balcony droop for more than like a day or 2 days at the most, I might water it, then they all perk back up, but then those leaves will all turn yellow and they'll all fall off, and then it'll grow a ton of new leaves almost immediately after. But like you have very little leeway when you notice that the plant wants water. Like, you have to act immediately.
I will say I have a lot of plants. Most of my plants are actually small because I like to grow plants up and I like to propagate stuff a lot. So I don't have huge plants. I do not have any figs at home.
Now, this is one of
No
my
ficus.
favorite
Well, you
genuses.
say you probably would want to sell it, right? From what you're saying.
Well,
right? Like if they sell
I mean,
out right
personally,
away,
I just
that makes sense.
don't. I honestly, I mean, as like well versed and experienced as I am with plants, like I just Ficus benjamina. It's so heartbreaking to like watch all of its leaves fall off.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the plant is not dead. It's just stressed out. Like, I mean, you have to think, like, this plant is growing in optimal conditions in a greenhouse, right?
Yeah.
It gets sold, put on a truck, probably from Florida, right? Ficus,
Yeah.
because it's not so special. It comes from Florida. If we're in Seattle, which is on the complete opposite side of the country, right? So a couple of days of travel in a box truck, goes to a wholesaler, goes to a retailer, goes to your home.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stress for a plant.
Yeah.
Especially one that doesn't like to have its
There's also the
environment
car ride home that might be way too hot. Yeah, like
people that have it at the back of a pickup truck and just like blowing all the leaves
well,
off
that's
of
going
it.
to defoliate for completely
Yeah.
other reasons. Yeah, and this is actually something that we talked about with orchids. Like, bud blast in orchids is sometimes unavoidable with grocery store plants because they've just been through hell and back to get to your coffee table. So, that's it on Ficus. That's all I want to share. I think they're great, but as you can tell, like...
And you know, I'll say for me, it's been fun to babysit this one. I feel like I would have one if I had a yard here in Western Washington, maybe, but I don't know if, maybe I'm kind of with you. I don't know if I would like bring them in my house. At this point, it's not the one I'm the most excited about. I mean, no offense. I know you're picking this.
I know.
But again, if I had an outdoor space. Oh, okay.
I like my plants to look like plants. I'm like dead sticks.
The deciduous edible figs, though, I mean, especially in the Seattle area, like completely, totally easy to care for outside.
Yeah.
And I want to say that they're hardy up to a zone 7A, maybe?
Yeah. So the next group of plants that I want to talk about is the Aracea family. It is not just a single genus. It is also known as the Arum, or the Aroid family, and it contains about 114 genera.
Is this a whole episode for the future, though? Like, talking about aroids? I mean, it has to be.
Like, these are so up and trending right now. Like, it's one of the most popular groups of plants for indoor horticulture. And you have about 3,750 species to choose from, so that's really exciting. Like the ficus, they're mostly found in the tropics, with some occurring in northern temperate climates. But while the figs are mostly distributed throughout the Old World tropics, Aracea is really diverse in the neotropics. So, whether you know it or not, everybody is very familiar with aroids, because this family contains some of the most prized and popular indoor foliage and flowering ornamentals. And these include like peace lilies, calla lilies, anthuriums, even the jack in the pulpit from temperate regions. Philodendron is also a genus of aroids, and it's loosely used to describe many other related non-philodendron genuses and species, including plants like the split-leaf philodendron, Monstera deliciosa, and the pothos, Epiprenium aurea. One of the largest flowers in the world is Amorphophallus titanium, and that name literally means giant misshapen penis. And it's a truly spectacular example of aurum. Yeah.
God, okay.
Amorphophallus titanium.
All right.
Yeah.
An amorphic phallus.
Yep.
Yeah.
Of titanium.
Yep.
Wow. Giant titan.
Yep. So it's a really spectacular example of aurums, and the structure of its flower is something that you'll see across all of the aroids. Instead of having a single flower that you'd find on something like an orchid or a rose, the aroids produce many small flowers as an inflorescence in a structure called spadix, and this is usually accompanied by or partially enclosed in a spathe, which is a leaf-like bract. Sometimes these are colorful and ornamental, and other times they're pretty inconspicuous. Aroids may be monoecious, with separate male and female flowers on the same plant, usually organizing the female flowers at the bottom with male at the top of the spadix. But some of them have what are known as perfect flowers, which are bisexual. Each flower is both male and female, but in aroids, the stigma is no longer receptive to pollination by the time that pollen is present, which reduces the chance of self-fertilization. Other aroids are even dioecious. Miles, how would you say that?
Dioecious.
Dioecious.
Monoecious and dioecious.
Thank you. This is where an individual plant is either male or female, but does not have flowers of both. So another fascinating thing about the flowers of aroids is that many plants in this family are actually thermogenic, which means that the flowers can produce their own heat, sometimes even reaching up to 113 degrees, even when the ambient air temperature is much lower. This mechanism serves a couple of interesting functions. First, it is obviously going to help protect the flower against cold damage in lower temperatures, but most importantly, it attracts pollinators, often beetles, who are going to seek out that warmth. Some species will even produce a really pungent, fetid aroma, like rotting flesh, to attract flies, which pollinate the plant. And by producing that heat, the flower actually allows its scent to carry even further. So, the giant misshapen penis aurum, Amorphophallus titanium, has the largest unbranched inflorescence of any plant. Though there are others that can vie for the honor of largest flower, you can quantify that in all kinds of different ways. This one is pretty well considered to be one of the biggest flowers. Far less known, though, is the smallest flowering plant with the smallest fruit, which is also an aroid. Stephen, do you know what aroid this is?
I think it might be a duckweed.
Yep, it is duckweed. It's that green floating plant.
Oh my
that
god, that's the smallest aroid?
According to the wiki.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it is the smallest flowering plant with the smallest fruit.
So I have tons of aroid.
Wow.
Yeah, but basically, it's that green scum on the top of Louisiana swamp. So yeah, that's a neat little fact. So plenty of aroids are grown primarily for their foliage, though, and the flowers on most of them are pretty small or inconspicuous, unornamental. A lot of these are the most well-known, so it includes Diphambachia, Aglaonema, Colocasia, Alocasia, Caladium, Nephitis, Philodendrons, and one of my favorites, the ZZ plant, Zamioculcas zamifolia. Aroids tend to contain oxalate crystals in their sap, and these can be significantly irritating if you consume them, causing bleeding, swelling, and difficulty swallowing, accompanied by stinging and burning.
So yeah, these as your favorite plants. Curious why.
I'm just telling
why
you
the
not to let
ZZ
your babies or your dogs eat them.
But why the ZZ plant? I'm just curious.
Oh, specifically that one, because it has dark, shiny foliage that is stiff and stands upright really nicely. It's very graphic because it's so bold in its presentation, and it's really hard to keep them from thriving. They can tolerate low light, high light.
No, exactly. To me, that's one of those plants that I'm like, do you live in a
This is the
cupboard?
plant
Maybe
that
you could,
I bought
grow
for
that
my
or
best
something.
girlfriend who cannot manage any plants, I bought her one of these and potted it up and was like, put it in that window and water it at least a couple times a year. And it's actually thrived for her. They put out a lot of new growth regularly. They're just really dependable. And I think that it's a really high ratio of aesthetic value to ease of indoor culture.
Okay.
They're also going to tolerate like a lot of different ways that you can abuse them. That's always the sign of a good plant. So, basically don't let your cats, dogs, or babies eat these because they'll irritate their throats. And in fact, that's why they call Dieffenbachia dumb cane, because it would strike you dumb because your throat would be swollen shut. And they would use that as a punishment for slavery in the South, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Whoa.
Anyway.
Wait, who was getting punished?
The slaves.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
They would be made to eat dumb cane if they were back-talking or something.
Oh, wow.
Oof. Okay.
Moving on.
So there are some, though, that are grown as, like, food crops. And, like, many of them have starchy tubers and corms. And some of them are even grown for their fruit, like Monstera deliciosa, which is also called Mexican breadfruit. One of the best things that makes these common house plants is that they're really adaptable to lower light, overwatering, underwatering, and dry air. It's not true for all of them, of course, but these traits usually offer these plants ideal positions in like offices and malls and random apartments. The pothos plant in particular is an ideal indoor vine because it's so resilient against many of the worst growing conditions that you're likely to put them in. A lot of them will grow terrestrially with their corms or tubers to sustain themselves through dormant periods, and this is often when they become deciduous. Now, these plants that are deciduous are usually best in the garden outdoors because you don't really want to have a plant indoors that is only visible for part of the year. The ones that grow as epiphytes, though, or partially as epiphytes in tropical regions, are much better for indoor use, typically. They come from dense jungles where there's an advantage to being able to climb or grow in a tree, where the lighting is better and the competition for space is less intense. And plants like these include anthuriums, which often grow in kind of a compact shrubby form, or there's many vining species. A lot of them will have distinctly different forms, though, which has made it very challenging to classify species. The distinct forms that signal the maturity of a plant are very different over the course of a plant's lifetime, and anybody with Monstera is probably familiar with this because the young leaves are heart-shaped with no holes, the juvenile leaves begin developing the desired cuts and splits, and the mature leaves feature really heavy cuts, holes, splitting, and each stage of maturity looks distinct enough that early collectors and taxonomists sometimes gave multiple species names to the same plant because they were describing the same plant at various stages of maturity. Often the young juvenile leaves are what we see when we're buying plants in specialty places. And this is especially true for vining varieties because they have these different stages as kind of a method for how they're growing and where they're growing. Like a vining philodendron will creep along the forest floor, and they have long internodes between leaves, and the leaves are relatively small. And they're actually oriented to find a shady location because that could be the base of a tree, which it's hoping to find. Once the vine finds a tree or something else to climb, it will do so and secure itself in place with roots that sprout from the stem in a manner similar to other epiphytes like orchids we discussed last episode. As it begins to climb, the leaf shape will change dramatically, becoming much larger as they mature and often taking on a completely new form and structures, where they might become puckered or rippled on their surface, develop lobes, splits, fenestration, which are the holes in the leaves. Some plants will happily exist in their juvenile form indefinitely, like the pothos, but some that we want to see mature quickly, like members of the Monstera genus, who take on far more dramatic and ornamental appearance when they are allowed to climb. So a way that we can achieve this is by staking or securing plants to a sturdy post. A trend that has been kind of going recently is using moss poles with your vining and climbing aroids, where you encourage the plant to grow on a secure stake that's wrapped with sphagnum moss, which you then keep moist when watering to encourage the plant to begin to climb. You get really rapid mature foliage with this method, and it's something that I'm interested in trying with some of my own at home, and we will keep you posted when I kind of have some experience to share on that. The majority of the indoor aroids like a good amount of water, but they usually don't mind getting dry at the same time. They are usually a plant that's pretty responsive, so they'll become limp and wilted when they're thirsty, but you can also just aim to keep them well watered so that they don't wilt. The potting mix can be straight potting soil, and because they're part epiphyte, they won't mind if you augment the drainage and lightness of the soil with some fir bark, perlite, sphagnum, or maybe even expanded clay pellets or horticultural charcoal. Water retention is good, solid drainage is also good, and regular watering is ideal. Many of them can tolerate direct light if it's been acclimated to it, but if you have foliage from a shade-grown indoor plant and put it directly in sun, it'll probably burn. But without sudden shock like this, bright and direct with some dappled sunlight's best. Humidity is ideally high for them, but it isn't critical for many of the common plants. Alocasia will often refuse to hold many leaves when the humidity is low, and anthuriums produce new foliage best when the humidity is high. So if a plant is having trouble thriving, try misting with water regularly, positioning them in areas sheltered from drafts that will reduce the humidity, or use gravel trays to help increase the humidity around the plants. One of the best ones grown for their flowers are the anthuriums and peace lilies. So if these fail to bloom indoors, that's usually a sign that they need a little bit more light. Try increasing it, keep them well watered, and you should see flowers on both of these throughout the year.
Another thing with getting your more ornate anthuriums, which I think the genus or the species for that's, is it Floribundum anthurium?
Like the florist one?
Yeah, like the flamingo flower.
Yeah.
I mean, what I've noticed in my own experience actually too is that I had it growing up really well. It was actually in a water culture, so it was getting a lot of water and the leaves were doing well. It was in full sun in a southern window.
And for listeners who aren't familiar, water culture is where you kind of use hydroponic techniques, growing a plant with its roots directly in water, whether you're using like expanded clay pellets or something as well. It's not the same as growing in potted mix.
Yeah, it was in like a kind of like a soil, like not a soilless, like gravel and water sort of.
Okay.
It's like with pebbles, I suppose. But yeah, it was part of like an arrangement that I put together, and it was growing in a southern window. It didn't flower, which is fine for me because I think the foliage is actually really pretty on this type of anthurium too. I decided to fertilize it just with like a general purpose fertilizer.
Did you use full strength?
I think that I used like a liquid one, so it's already more dilute, but it's still concentrated technically.
Yeah.
I think all I did, because a lot of times I don't even read the instructions, I just, eyeball it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a professional grower, so it's just like...
Miles eyeballing things is better than most of us using a measuring spoon.
I knew like what the amount of water was like in the vessel, and I knew like by putting in like 2 drops of this fertilizer would be fine.
Yeah.
So it was just a salt-based liquid fertilizer. I put it in, and like within a month, like it was just full of flowers. Like just crazy. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So when I work with people, a lot of times I tell them like it actually wants pretty bright light. Like it's one of those that can take like direct sunlight in your home. Like probably don't want to put it outside in direct sunlight, but like in a nice southern area in your home. And don't forget to fertilize it because they do need fertilizer, and it was really missing that with mine, and the flowers just took off. So
all right,
really fun.
You heard it here. Use fertilizer, at least occasionally.
And just eyeball it.
Yeah.
And just eyeball it.
Okay, so that's it for what Steven and I wanted to discuss. But, Miles, we have a couple of plant questions for you. What are some groups of plants that you think that people should gravitate towards as new growers?
Oh, yeah. I think that I was thinking about this, and I think that you mentioned a lot of good ones. Generally, when people come into the store, a lot of people buy plants as gifts, which they make great gifts. I guess it's like even if a person kills a plant, it's like they generally are going to last longer than like cut flowers.
Yeah.
So that's a good gift in my mind. But yeah, so generally where I point people towards is ZZ plants, because like what you were saying, super easy to take care of, just needs adequate drainage, doesn't want to be wet. That's a lot of times when people come in, what I tell them is how to kill a plant. So when they come in and I recommend a ZZ plant, I'm like, look, it can take high light, it can take low light, it grows best in bright filtered light, and the way that you kill it is by keeping the roots wet all the time, because it has those underground, geophyte structures, right?
Like starchy tubers.
Yeah, are they tubers? I'm not really sure. Exactly
I don't know what you'd actually. It's like swollen roots.
Yeah, it has. Yeah. So it has a geophyte is a general term, by the way, that just means an underground structure of a plant that other than the roots. So like any kind of bulb or corm or whatever is a geophyte. But they have those, and so they're big starchy structures that don't want to stay wet. So that's how you kill it. So ZZ plant is definitely one of them. I also do snake plants as a recommendation, which Sansevieria is actually a pretty varied genus. There's lots of different kinds.
It goes way beyond like the mother-in-law's tongue.
Yeah, the mother-in-law's tongue is just one. I mean, they're still beautiful, and there's really great ones. I think like the black coral, the mother-in-law's tongue, snake plant, Sansevieria is really pretty.
And they give a really great mid-century modern vibe.
Yes, they have a very nice vertical line, sort of architectural structure. Those are super easy to care for. And then the last one, which is maybe a little less easier, but still super easy, is like a sago palm. And these are all plants that kind of will do well, like even if you neglect them, and you have, adequate light. With the Sansevieria and the ZZ plant, like they can survive pretty well in a really low light environment. You just have to water them less. If you keep watering them, they'll kind of stretch out and get a little leggy, or floppy. Like I've seen snake plants get a little floppy with too much water and too low of light. And then the sago palm just wants to dry out, doesn't want to get overwatered, and just kind of wants to go like in a sunny spot, like in your home. So those are plants that I think make really great gifts if you're going to give them to someone, especially if you don't know like what their skill level is, or if you're just getting into plants. Those are ones that I recommend, going with right off the bat.
Cool. So if you're a gay plant guy trying to impress another gay plant guy, you want to do this by like posting a picture of a plant to Instagram, what would be your ideal recommendation?
And I was thinking this is like, maybe you don't know a lot about plants.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy.
Like if you're trying to catch someone's eye.
The Instagram plant game is like insane. And so I don't know, because I think some people could know like a lot about plants, and maybe if you post like a spider plant, like they think you're totally pedestrian and not worthy. But let's just say if you're just trying to like catch their eye, I think there's some really great larger pictured nepenthes out there that have a very nice phallic structure.
I didn't realize that's where you were going to go.
Before
that's
that
perfect.
That took a twist. But.
Yeah. So they have like the nepenthes are a tropical pitcher plant that are they're vining, and then their pitcher is like an elongated tube, and right before it opens, it has a little cap, which I'm sure has some sort of name.
Peristome.
Oh, peristome. Okay, I haven't researched it enough. But that before it opens up looks like a very delicious penis, I suppose.
Yeah, I've definitely seen photos where they look particularly dick-like.
Yes. So,
and those are more and more available, right?
They're like super available. It seems like I get them all the time. There's the most common species. I want to like you probably know better. It's like sanguine, or what is what's the most common?
Sanguinea is I think that's the best, most common one.
Yeah,
sanguinea though is not the most common one.
I'm not sure. It's like I get them in and they have like no name on
them. The most common one that you're going to encounter is a hybrid between ventricosa and a lotta that they're calling like ventrata. And actually, like within the hobby, people just like look down on you, like a spider plant would be cooler than a ventrata. But as far as ease
Sort
of indoor
but-
picturing,
Yeah.
like these do so well.
But I would say, yeah, they're still really pretty. Out here in Seattle, some people are growing them outdoors in the summer.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
so-
sure.
And
Yeah.
they grow so quickly for that
Yeah,
genus.
yeah. It's actually so growing that one too, in my own experience, is that it's not super sensitive to tap water, whereas some of the other ones are.
I think people say that it's
Yeah.
less sensitive.
But
Yeah.
we are really lucky in the Seattle area that our water is really pretty okay. And a lot of the sensitivity that some plants have is not as
It's
much
to
of an
the-
issue here.
Yeah, well, it has to do with the dissolved salts in the water and chlorine and stuff. And so Seattle actually comes out at 30 parts per million or less for total dissolved solids, whereas on the other hand, in San Diego, comes out like 150 to 200.
So you definitely
and,
need
like,
to use like distilled water if you're going to
yeah.
vet these
Well,
there.
you need like some sort of filter, to get, if you want to
Yeah.
use it on the plants that are more sensitive to that. And then like Hawaii comes out like at 300,
Yeah.
which honestly, it's not bad necessarily. It's really hard water, but it's more like
it's just different.
it's different. I mean, and it could even be better for us to drink. It just has it has more minerals in it,
Yeah.
But plants and fish, if you're an aquarist, like they don't necessarily want to have that much of dissolved solids in there.
Especially if it has adapted itself to grow in really like resource poor regions
Right.
where it's having to live on insects falling into its traps.
Right. Yeah, and I can't. Why were we talking about these? Oh yeah, because they
Yeah.
look like wieners.
Yeah.
Or just,
okay.
if you're
So-
trying to impress a plant person.
Oh yeah, so
And
I think like I don't know if that. So I was going with catch an eye, so that would definitely catch
Oh,
someone's
yeah.
eye.
Okay.
If you're trying to impress someone, I think like you could probably look at top plant trends on Instagram and probably just
take any of
like
those.
take your pick.
I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, if it's something that's relatively easy, but it is cool now, maybe there's some begonia, right? That like you could get.
begonia is like a tough
that-
one.
is
I'm
it
a
tough?
begonia lover. I think begonias are classically like an old lady's plant. But I
Well, especially
think,
the angel wing ones.
yeah, well, and
okay, you guys keep
tuberous
burning
and
me for that.
I mean,
Right.
Rex
Hey, I had,
begonias.
like,
one
one
thing
of
I
them.
liked.
I personally love begonias. I think that mark my words, I think that they're going to be making a resurgence here.
So,
they're
you
pretty
I think
easy.
they already
I think
are.
they already have.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying,
Well,
yeah.
I think like a much bigger resurgence
Okay.
than they've
Okay.
had. I think like because I love them and I don't buy as many as I would like to because they don't really move as quickly as I would like them
Oh.
to in the store. So
I have
I
to-
mostly get Rex.
Yeah.
but yeah,
The rhizomatic begonias, rhizomaceous.
yeah.
I have very poor luck with those. At the best, I can keep them alive for a few months, but they also come to death eventually. However, the begonias that I am really happy with are the cane ones.
Oh yeah.
Those tend to do really well. And one of my favorite new plants that's not that new anymore is Begonia wrighty or whitey, but it's
yeah.
that's a cultivar of classic like angel wing begonia, but it has really, really dark, almost black, velvety foliage with iridescent silver spots on it, and the undersides of the leaves are bright red.
Right.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are really popular.
Yeah, I
on social
totally
media.
forgot about the big Instagram begonia right now.
Yeah,
which
like-
is Begonia maculata.
Yeah, that's its
That's-
species. The cultivar is whitey.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
that's a super popular one right now.
Have you heard anything about Cerestis mirabilis?
Huh?
No, but you're probably not saying the
I am sure
the
I'm
name
not.
in a way that I would.
Cerestis mirabilis.
Wait, let me. Do you have it pulled up
I've
here?
got it right there.
Oh no!
This is a plant
sorry.
that I was hoping Miles might know something about. It is an aroid.
Yeah.
And it has really, really mottled foliage. It almost looks like a green arrowhead leaf, but then with white ferns that are like laid down pointing in towards the middle. The way that the variegation
as the pattern.
goes.
Yeah.
And that one I have recently seen blowing up my Instagram and Pinterest.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So, anyway.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a variegated like syngonium
Yeah, and
or like definitely an arum.
yeah.
Yeah.
It almost has like a little bit of calathea to it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Calathea.
Okay.
Wait, Calathea or Caladium?
Caladium.
Caladium.
Yeah, caladium.
Yeah, it's got a caladium look to it. Yeah.
So caladial.
It calls me back to actually Arum italicum.
Oh, yeah.
I think the leaf looks very similar to that.
It actually does. That's an invasive species here in Seattle.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, like it is a controlled plant. And if you live in the U District and have gone through any like kind of shady, moist garden areas,
Wow.
you have almost certainly seen it. It's kind of like a Jack in the Pulpit where it has like...
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool plant.
Yeah, it's actually really beautiful.
It has a really neat, beautiful, like, fruiting structure.
Yeah, like the leaves are really attractive through winter, actually. They're deciduous in the summer, but they have leaves through the winter and early spring. They flower in the spring, and then the flowers transition over to these spikes that are covered with, like...
red berries.
Yeah, they're really pretty.
What's the plant called? I'm looking it up.
Arum italicum.
It's native to Europe, and it's completely hardy here. And the reason that it becomes such a problem for control is that it produces many small, like, little bulbils and little offshoots.
Like bulblets?
Yeah, like... Yeah,
like little buds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, like, if you try to dig it up, if you leave a single piece of it...
Yeah, we cultivate it in Ohio, but it's not invasive.
If you have winters that are, like, 7B or warmer... they don't kill them off reliably. If you live in colder climates, they'll come back, but they won't thrive as well. So, like, there are some areas that it's become a big problem.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how to spell that at all.
Arum?
It's phonetic.
Ital.
Italicum.
From Italy.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, italicum. I'm like,
Yeah. It's a really attractive plant.
okay.
It is, yeah. Well, that's
but I
interesting.
mean-
I did not know that it was invasive here.
I found that out when I was ordering some to plant in my balcony shade garden.
Yeah, because that would be great. It's like a woodland plant.
Yeah. Yeah. So I haven't seen it come up yet because it's deciduous during the summer.
Right. Do you have any gingers, like wild gingers?
I don't.
Oh, like asarum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
like
sorry.
Canadans
I was
or
thinking
like
like...
Yeah, no,
Zinziberi.
asarum. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
I have Asarum canadensis alba.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's just about it. So thank you so much, Miles, for coming on today as our very first ever guest.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
My
we are
pleasure.
really happy to have had you here on Plant Daddy Podcast and are very excited for our next episode where you're going to tell us everything we need to know about grow lights and supplementing your lighting in an indoor space. Yes, that is what you're doing next time.
So excited. I hope you're ready to listen to me talk just like solid hour.
That's all I want.
All right, yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna leave.
Any closing thoughts, Stephen?
No, just wanted to, thanks, Miles, for being on.
All right.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you. Well, this has been Plant Daddy Podcast. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, check out our social media, and tune in next time. Thanks.
Thanks.